Hi guys, so today we're going to review how to find the area of a parallelogram, a triangle, a trapezoid, and two examples of complex shapes. We're going to first start off with finding the area of a parallelogram. To find the area of parallelograms, we use this formula right here. We do base times height. So let's take a look at our shape. So let's find our base. We have our base here of 5 inches. And then let's find our height. We have our height right here. It's length from the top to the bottom of the shape. We have 6 inches. So let's fill in our formula with those numbers. We have our base, 5, times our height of 6. And if we multiply those numbers together, we would get 30. And then we have our units. It's important to remember your units. We have 30 inches squared. Okay? So to find the area of a parallelogram, you would use this formula, base times height. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at finding the area of a triangle. So to find the area of a triangle, we use this formula right here. Area equals base times height divided by 2. So base times height divided by 2. The reason we divide by 2 is because a triangle is a half of a parallelogram. So if we were to mirror this triangle, so we make a double of it, it would equal up a whole parallelogram. So that is why we divide by 2. So if we were to use our formula to find area, we would do 7 as our base down here, 7 times our height, which is 3. The height is the distance from the top to the bottom, the highest point of the triangle to the bottom, to the base. Okay? So sometimes the height will be inside the triangle, and sometimes the height will be outside of the triangle. So it's always important to look at that. Okay, so where are we? Filling in our formula. So our height is 3. And then we need to divide all that by 2. So what do we have? We have 21. 7 times 3 equals 21. Divided by 2, and we get 10 and a half. Okay, so we get 10 and a half. But it's always important, right, to remember our units. So our units would be feet squared. So the area of this triangle would be 10 and a half feet squared. Now let's take a look at finding the area of a trapezoid. Okay, so when we're finding the area of a trapezoid, we're going to use this formula. We have base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2 multiplied by the height. All right, so we have two bases here. Our first base is right here, 14 inches. Okay, and now we need to find our second base, which is right here, 42 inches. And then we need to find our height. And so we know our height is the length from top to bottom, right, of the shape, and we have 20 inches. Okay, so now let's use those numbers and fill in our formula. So we have base 1, 14, and we're going to add base 2, 42, and then we're going to divide by 2, and we're going to multiply by the height. So our height was 20. So if we do the math, 14 plus 42, and then it was 56 divided by 2, we would get 28, and then we're going to multiply that by 20, okay? And we would get 560, my equal sign, 560. But we're not done yet. We need to have our units, which would be inches squared, okay? So to find the area of a trapezoid, you would do base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2 times the height, all right? All right, we're going to take a look at one of our first two examples of finding the area of a complex shape. So when we look at complex shapes, we want to see what other shapes make up that whole complex shape. So when I look at this shape, I see 3 rectangles. I see one rectangle here, another rectangle here, and a third rectangle right here. Okay, so those are my 3 shapes that I see. Excuse me. What I need to do is I need to find the area of each of those shapes. Since they're all rectangles, I'm going to use the same formula the whole time. So remember that finding the area of a rectangle is length times width. Okay? Also, we could do base times height. Okay, and we have our base times our height. All right. So let's look at it. Let's look at our first rectangle here. Okay, so we're going to find the area of this one first. We have our base, which is 2, times our height, which is 8. And so 2 times 8 is 16. And so we need to do our unit, 16 feet squared. Okay, so that's the area of that first rectangle. Now let's take a look at our second rectangle. We'll do the same thing. We have our base times our height, 5 times 2, and we get 10. So we have 10 feet squared. Now we're going to look at the same thing, the third triangle, another rectangle, sorry. Our third rectangle. When I look at this rectangle, I notice I don't have a side here. I don't know my height, but I know that these two sides are parallel, right? So this length is going to be the length of this side, following the geometry rules. So we have 8 feet. Since those are parallel, they are the same height. If we were to grab a ruler, they would be the same height, okay? So I'm going to do a look at finding the area of our last rectangle here. So we found our height now. So we are going to do 3 times 8, and when we do that, we have 24, okay? So now we're going to add these numbers all together. Oh, forgot my units, 24 feet squared. Sorry. We're going to do 16 plus 10 plus 24, all 3 areas. And we would get 50, okay? 50 feet squared, all right? So when we look at this complex shape, we found the area. First, we looked at what shapes it had, and then we found the area of each of those shapes, and then added it together using addition, and we got 50 feet squared, okay? Now we're going to take a look at our last complex shape. So we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to look for which shapes we can see. So I see right here a rectangle, so that's my first shape, and I also see a triangle right here, okay? So those are the 2 shapes we're going to look for the area. So we're going to do, here we can use the formula base times height, right, or length times width, the same thing for a rectangle. And for up here, since we have a triangle, we are going to do base times height divided by 2, okay? So when we do that, let's first do the rectangle. We're going to do 9 times 7, base times height, length times width, same thing for a rectangle, and we get 63, all right? And we have feet squared. So now let's take a look at our triangle. So I see that we have our height of 2 feet, but I don't see our base, and we need a base. So the way we can figure out what our base is we can look at what other information this picture gives us. So down here I see 9 feet, okay? That was our base for our rectangle. This 9 feet is going to help us figure out what is this space here, okay? Because we're given 6 feet, right? So from here to here is 6 feet, and we need to figure out that last little bit, all right? So how we're going to do that is we know that this side is equal to this side because they're parallel, right? And when we look at rectangles, we know that a rectangle has 2 equal sides here and here, and that 2 equal sides here and here, okay? So if we have 9 feet here, and so far only 6 feet is given to us, if we do 9 minus 6, we get 3. So that's how we know our base is 3 feet. All right, now we have all the information we need to use our formula. Okay, so let's do our formula. Let's plug in our numbers. We have base 3 times our height of 2. And we're going to divide all that by 2. So we have 6 times 2 is 6. Or 3 times 2 is 6, sorry. And we're going to divide that by 2. And we're going to have 3. And then we need our units, 3 feet squared. Just like with the last complex shape, we're going to add both areas together. So we have our area of 63 plus our area of 3. And we would get 66 feet squared. Okay? So for complex shapes, we look at what shapes do we have that make up all that big shape, and then we find the areas. So we had to use the area of a rectangle and an area of a triangle, and then we added those together to get our total area of 66 feet squared. Okay, so today we've gone over how to find the area of a parallelogram by doing base times height. We've gone over how to find the area of a triangle, which is base times height divided by 2. We found the area of trapezoids, which is base 1 plus base 2. Divide that by 2, and then multiply it by the height. And then we found how to do complex shapes. And the complex shapes is going to depend on what shapes are given, right? Whether you get all rectangles or whether you have some triangles. So you're going to have to look at that closely. All right, so I'm going to give you guys a worksheet to work on to practice finding the area of different shapes. Thank you.